Hey everyone, Brian here. Once upon a time in a faraway land, a prosperous farmer lived in a comfortable castle. He'd spent many years building his wealth and working hard. The harvest was in and the farmer sat at his table enjoying a well-deserved meal, looking forward to a comfortable winter when the alarm bell rang. Running out to the yard, he arrives in time to see another man running off with a large amount of his wealth. This wealth the farmer had wasn't just for him, but all the people who worked for him. He took off after the thief. Running as fast as he could, thinking of all the people who depended on him, he didn't pay attention to a large spot in the road where the land fell away. The farmer fell to his death, and the thief got away with a large amount of wealth. The farmer's land fell into disrepair. The people who worked for the farmer became desperate and left, and the land was never the same. The thief, a lazy good-for-nothing named Jack, lived well on his ill-gotten gains. Does this story sound familiar to you? Think about it while we roll the intro. Did you figure it out? I gave you a clue with the name Jack. Did you get Jack and the Beanstalk? Now, I may have selectively withheld some information, like the great wealth being the golden goose, but as you have the name, you've probably picked up on the essential elements. I hope you picked up on the fact that I told this story from the giant's point of view. Did that change your perspective at all? Think for just a moment about the many other stories that you've heard throughout your lifetime, and pause the video here to write down a couple of ideas about how these stories could change if you looked at them from a different perspective. Keep those in mind, but for now, let's answer these questions today. Why do we need multiple perspectives? What do multiple perspectives tell us, and how can we use multiple perspectives to create a fuller view of history? Let's bring this example a little closer to home. If you've ever played with brothers, sisters, or friends, then you've probably encountered a situation where something unfortunate happened. Maybe you broke a window, lost a toy, hit someone on accident, or maybe not. In that case, when the supervising adult shows up and wants to know what happened, whoever the guilty party is has a pretty good reason to omit some critical information, right? So what you need, especially if you're the one who got hurt or is being blamed for something, is a different perspective. You need an observer who can tell a different story to verify that there was more than one way to look at the situation. Have you seen this particular Columbus meme before? It usually surfaces right around Columbus Day, which makes sense, but what does this meme mean? Pause the video briefly and make a guess in your lesson guide. What Cristobal Colombo, as he would have been known in his lifetime, did is a complicated subject. His voyages paved the way for European movement to North and South America, a process which completely changed the world. Many of us live where we do in part because of his voyages. However, his accidental encounter with two possibly unknown continents, there is quite a bit of debate about that as well, while looking for Southeast Asia and subsequently claiming the land for Spain had one big problem. Namely, there were already 40 to 100 million people living there. Columbus' treatment of these first peoples was so horrendous that he was arrested and sent back to Spain because of it. The thing to note is that had one man, Bartolomé de las Casas, not reported to the Spanish about what was happening, it's likely Columbus would have never been caught. Why? Well, the effects of European-born disease on the native populations are pretty well known, with up to a 90% fatality rate among many First People groups, making their voice completely unheard. Had they survived, it's almost certain that their perspective on Columbus would have been just as negative as de las Casas. Multiple perspectives of an event help us to find the bigger picture, the other point of view. Remember what we said about never getting the full picture of history? One way we combat that lack of information is by gathering as much as possible from as many sources as possible. And let's start here with another quote. This one from Winston Churchill, English Prime Minister during World War II. Pause the video here, read the quote, and jot down what you think Churchill was trying to convey with this statement. Churchill's sentiment is often shortened down to, "History is written by the victors." Is that what you got from Churchill's quote? Do you think that's true? And if so, what does that mean for the study of history? Head back to your lesson guide and briefly answer that question. In 1095, Pope Urban II delivered a speech at the Council of Clermont calling for a holy war against the barbarians, by which he meant Turkish tribes. Their influence had seemingly grown in Southwest Asia, namely in the area of Jerusalem, a sacred space for Christians. This call launched an era which were known in Europe as the Crusades. From 1095 to 1291, thousands of knights, nobles, kings, and commoners yearned for the chance to take up the cross and become a crusader. Any who survived returned to acclaim and were forgiven of all sins. The Crusades were among the most celebrated events throughout medieval Europe. And the response to the Crusades by Muslim chroniclers and historians during this time, meh. If they referred to the Crusades at all, it was usually something like, "and another bunch of ill-mannered Frankish barbarians showed up again, did some damage, and left." Muslim historians saw the Crusades as slightly larger events in a long train of barbarian invasions, which to them lasted until the fall of Constantinople under the armies of Mehmed II in 1453. To understand the context, let's look at where these historians came from. At this time, the city of Baghdad, the center of the Islamic caliphates, may have had more than 500,000 people, while the Muslim cities of Alexandria, Cairo, Mecca, and Medina may have had nearly that many. The Islamic world of the 11th to 13th centuries was highly urbanized and marked by scholarship, poetry, and wealth. By contrast, Paris, among Europe's largest cities at the time of the Crusades, would have had no more than 20,000 people living there. Europe was very poor, with small cities and settlements, had very few centers of learning, and the economy was primarily focused on supporting the continual wars between the nobility of Europe. For the Europeans, the Crusades were significant events launched to free the Holy Land from the infidel, a French European word meaning non-Christians. For the Muslims, it was waves of poor barbarians looking for treasure and land. Different perspectives of the same event can tell us what? Head to your lesson guide and, taking these two perspectives in mind, write a brief summary of attitudes about the Crusades. Was it difficult to find a middle road? That's the challenge of history, and yet, if we don't do everything we can to find out as much as we can, we may miss critical elements which broaden and deepen our knowledge. Do me this favor. Quickly see if you can write down a very brief, very broad overview of the American Revolution. Pause the video and use the timeline in your lesson guide. So, which events did you include? You may have had some or all of these. There are many others, but these are generally some of the well-known highlights. Would it surprise you to know that there were over 165 principal engagements throughout the war? Or that General Washington's battle record ended up being 10 losses and 2 wins? So how do we use multiple perspectives to present a fuller view of history? We start by acknowledging that the different perspectives lend depth to an event that we may think we already know quite a bit about. Knowing that the revolution had hundreds of engagements may help in the understanding that it was far more drawn out and uncertain than the victors may have made it seem. In the same way, when we see through this course the influence of the Enlightenment on thinking and perhaps begin to believe that the thinkers of this period must be primarily European. However, a Canadian Wendat chief, Kondiaronk, is said not only to have visited Paris in the late 17th century, but to have debated the French in Canada over all of their beliefs, coming to the conclusion that French society was in no way free at all. In fact, he expressed his desire for his French friends to live better lives with this quote, "In earnest, my dear brother, I am sorry for you from the bottom of my soul. Take my advice and turn Wendat. For I see plainly a vast difference between your condition and mine. I am master of my own body. I have the absolute disposal of myself. I do what I please." Most of our perspectives on thought in history are Eurocentric, with little thought given to anyone else. This passage from a statesman and philosopher of the first peoples turns this whole idea on its head. For our last question, pause the video here and think about this. What impact does it have on world history to think of all peoples as capable equals instead of victims and conquerors? From different views of the same historical event to different perspectives on events that you may think you know well, it's essential to find more than one point of view. While not all views are equal, and some views may even give us information that may not be completely accurate, it serves to provide context to an event which we would otherwise only have one perspective on. That wraps it up for today. Don't forget the extension activity, and remember, history is everywhere.
Hey, hey.